We are all set to get started. So once again, my name is Mike. I represent ClearAdmit, which is a great resource site for folks who are looking to go to school for their MBA. Anybody who is in that application phase, needs some tips and advice and help through that process, please come over and check out clearadmit.com. You can utilize all the different resources that we have there for you. And the best part is most of those resources are free. So check us out, register, get yourselves onto the site. And one of those programs that we cover on the site is Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business MBA program. Tonight, this session will be all things Tepper. We have a great panel, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and that'll be led tonight by the Director of Admissions over at Tepper, J.R. McGrath. J.R., I'll let you take it from there.
Awesome, Mike. I appreciate you and appreciate ClearAdmit for the opportunity here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen there. And so one, I just want to say a warm welcome from the Tepper School of Business. As Mike said, my name is JR. I'm the Director of Recruiting here. We have a great session plan. What I'm going to do is do a quick little overview of our school and program, so that way everybody gets a little sense and flavor of Tepper. And then what we're going to do is introduce our panelists, our alumni panelists, and talk to them about their experience as they were in the program and how that is translated into success after the program. So without further ado, let me just give you a little bit of an introduction here. There we go. So at Tepper, we're powering the future. And what does the future hold for business, for society, for you? The world is speeding towards a new age defined by vast quantities of data. And will you be able to harness this information to make sound, innovative business decisions? And Tepper is the home for the intelligent future, driven by data, reimagined by humans. So Tepper combines advanced analytics, with individualized leadership coaching to unleash your boldest thinking. So on this slide, what you'll see here is what is management science. And that's where Carnegie Mellon is the birthplace of where this data-informed approach to business was born. Instead of looking into the rearview mirror and using only case studies, our faculty wanted to teach students how to solve problems that had no precedent. Analysis and insight are our power. The art of leadership is a personalized approach to leadership development. Emotional intelligence is our asset. Future leaders need self-knowledge, empathy, and the ability to inspire. All of these things are specific and unique to you. What's powerful, though, about overall Carnegie Mellon is that it's going to be this combination. One without the other is not going to lead you to the success that you're looking for. Data is only as powerful as the human intellect and creativity we use to interpret it and act upon it. So how do we do this? So it starts with a strong foundation. So you'll look at this in terms of our robust core curriculum that is designed to provide advanced analytics and business fundamentals, as well as leadership and communication foundations that you'll work also with the Accelerate Leadership Center. You'll gain depth and breadth as you apply the foundational skills in your chosen electives. And at Tepper, you have the flexibility to customize your curriculum based on your goals and needs during your electives. You can choose either multiple concentrations or a track to deepen and apply your analytic and leadership skills. Develop your areas of focus from a multidisciplinary menu of options. So really what this means is you're going to be able to, if you want, to go in terms of breadth with our concentrations. Concentrations would consist of 3 classes in any different area. Many students that go in this route would have 3 to 5 concentrations. Tracks have 8 to 10 electives, as well as a specific capstone in that area. So typically students that go down the track route would just really have that one track that they're going for, and they get really deep into a specific content area. What's also exciting about the Tepper experience is that you have an added benefit of all of the graduate programs across campus. They took off the cap and you can take unlimited electives in the other master's programs throughout the 7 colleges and schools at Carnegie Mellon. We've talked about the benefits of our approach, but what about the environment and community that you'll be a part of? Tepper's culture is collaborative as our work is challenging. Because it is challenging, you'll need a close-knit community built around teams to support you. And in this small community, opportunities abound, and you'll have many chances to test your skills. But what is the perception of a Tepper MBA? Are they an engineer? Are they a math whiz? We get it. There are many engineers and math whizzes who succeed at Tepper, but there are just as many from other backgrounds too. A recent prospective student summed up their experience best by saying, I previously was intimidated by Tepper's reputation of being a tech/quant heavy school. Perhaps it felt like it was being very rigid or dry, but all the people I interacted with were both currently at the school and who also attended the prospective student weekends were warm and reassuring that this was a place for all students of all backgrounds. It's a community where teams are strengthened by diverse viewpoints and skill sets, as well as the strong bonds that you'll have with your classmates over your life. CMU has 105,000 alumni, and Tepper alums are spread over 85 countries to open doors for you. Lastly, Pittsburgh will be your backdrop. What you may not know about Pittsburgh is that Pittsburgh used to be a steel town, used to be an industrial city. It has made a complete transformation into a tech and healthcare hub. And what you also know is that it is a city now built around an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Over 260 startups have been launched since 2008. And since 2011, CMU companies have raised over $1 billion. So with that little bit of an introduction, I want to go ahead and spend time with our alumni and talk a little bit more about their experience. And we're going to go ahead and introduce them. So Victoria, I was wondering if maybe you would kick us off here and go over your hometown, the undergrad university degree you had, what you were doing prior to B school, and then what you were doing now post B school.
Sure. Hi, welcome everyone. Happy to be here and talk about Tepper. So as JR mentioned, my name is Victoria Lopez. I'm originally from Mexico, but I actually grew up in Pittsburgh, kind of from 7 until I left after my MBA. I went to the University of Pittsburgh for undergrad and I studied politics and philosophy and history. So I was a humanities major that had a perfectly successful time at Tepper. After my undergrad, I actually worked for the University of Pittsburgh as a management consultant working with startups and small businesses. So whether you wanted to start a restaurant in the city or you were a startup coming out of CMU, we just provided consulting services to anybody in the city. After that, I applied for the MBA, and then I've been working at Microsoft for the past 2 years as a customer success manager in modern work. So I essentially assist with Teams deployments. Did I miss anything, JR?
You did not, sorry. That was me fumbling through to unmute myself, but Todd, I saw you unmute yourself, so why don't you kick it off next?
Yeah, I think this is the first time I haven't started speaking while on mute recently. So hi, everybody. My name is Todd Brewer. I'm class of 2018. Worked closely with Victoria at school, so it's nice to see her involved here too. I grew up in Long Island, currently live in New York City. I did my undergraduate at Lehigh University, where I studied finance and accounting. And then afterwards, I went to work in financial services. I was at Deutsche Bank and Blackstone in their corporate treasury department. I went to business school because I wanted to achieve a career change. And so, I'm really happy to talk about the opportunities that this brings. But now I work in consulting at a company called AlixPartners.
Awesome, Todd. Thank you for that. Nick, you're top left of my screen. Why don't you go next?
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. So a little bit about myself. So I graduated Tepper class of 2015. Hometown, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, got my undergraduate at University at Buffalo, studied finance. I graduated from undergrad in 2009, which was right in the middle of the financial crisis then. Didn't end up going into finance and actually went into manufacturing in the aerospace and defense industry. And so learned a lot about manufacturing, fell in love with supply chain. After my work there, I went and came to Carnegie Mellon for my MBA. After that, I spent a few years in consulting, joined Wayfair, helped build out their Wayfair delivery network in Boston. And just recently, I joined a company called Perch, which, if you haven't heard of us, we're a fast growing startup. We acquire basically small consumer brands that primarily sell on Amazon, but other channels, and are quickly purchasing, snapping up these companies and trying to optimize their supply chain and their growth opportunities. So interesting path from very corporate world all the way to a company that's hired half of its staff in the past 3 months. So it's been an interesting career trajectory.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Sounds like we haven't heard of Perch yet. You'll hear of it soon. And Shamel, you're up next if you want to close this out.
Yes, sir. All right. So my name is Shamel Jacobs. Tepper class of 2019, so same year as Victoria. My hometown, I'm originally from the Bronx, New York. So born and raised New Yorker. Went to undergrad at Syracuse, so upstate, similar to Nick here. Then prior to business school, I actually worked at Accenture. So actually undergrad, I did computer engineering. So when I worked at Accenture initially, I started in some of their software development practice until I moved into consulting, doing more so like infrastructure, like integration related projects. And I knew I wanted to do MBA for a while, and Carnegie Mellon seemed like a perfect fit there. So went to Carnegie Mellon, where I actually focused in business technologies, trying to switch into tech. And then post MBA, I actually worked at VMware first as a product manager, and now I'm currently a product manager over at Google.
Awesome. So thanks you all for giving your introduction, so everybody gets a little bit of sense of maybe background, where you're coming from. And I wanted to go through maybe a couple of the topic areas just so everyone can maybe understand your journey a little bit more while in the program. So maybe let's talk about that academic focus first. So there's a few different things that we could go with, but I think what may be helpful is maybe what path you took, whether you took maybe that concentration path and maybe you went for that breadth, or if you did any of the different tracks, then maybe you went for something more focused. So does anybody want to kick off and talk a little bit about that academic journey they had at Tepper?
I don't mind. You got it.
Go ahead, Shamel.
Oh, all right. So I didn't actually do a track. Definitely coming in, I knew I wanted to do tech, but I was also wanted to explore many different areas. So that's why I didn't do like the tech related tracks, knowing that also I wanted to go abroad and a few other things that I felt like if I just chose my own concentration, it would give me a little more flexibility. So I actually ended up focusing in business technologies, marketing management, and organizational behavior. It's pretty easy to actually rack up the number of concentrations while at Tepper. So don't think it's like, all right, you just did over too much essentially. But the business technology is pretty much just wanting to figure out the intersections of business and technology and how technology is driving the way a lot of businesses are defining their strategies going forward. And there's definitely a ton of courses within Tepper as well as outside of Tepper and like the other schools, like the CS schools that helped me fulfill the requirements there. And then marketing management, knowing that working in product management, sometimes they consider that somewhat a marketing related field. So that definitely helped me there. And then organizational behavior, definitely a strong suit at Tepper. And I really wanted to figure out like, how can I be like a better player within an organization, whether I'm like managing people or just interacting and playing my part and figuring out how to negotiate, understand like power and influence, and just make things work as a new young professional in the management related fields.
Awesome. And it sounds like so you really use that breadth to be able to grab all those different skill sets and really make it customized for you and what you needed to take that next step. So that sounds great. Anybody else want to jump in?
I was just going to add what Shamel said about organizational behavior. I think, Tepper's always branded as like the analytics school, but the organizational behavior program and classes at Tepper, I felt like were one of the most interesting and value added to my career that I continue to use today. especially as like you're taking on management and leadership positions. Those are the ones that, you know, I'm always thinking back to, always going back to, and how I can influence change or get the most out of my team to perform. And thinking about, you know, if we're doing a big, hairy program, how do you get the right stakeholders on board? And so Tepper has a great organizational behavior program too, that is more so than even like analytics, some of the stuff I still use today.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that.
And JR, I can speak briefly. I chose to do a track. So I went the entrepreneurship track while I was at Tepper. And I think there are two things that I want to highlight is I did come from the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Pittsburgh that you mentioned in your slide. So it's grown a lot over the past years and there's a lot of exciting activity. And the nice thing about being in that ecosystem is that you're kind of 1 degree of separation from someone who's doing something really cool, which I think is a unique aspect of the program that, you know, Dave or Craig or any of the professors in the department can connect you to exactly who you need to speak to about a business idea. And there's great resources. I chose that track because I came from it, but also I knew I was going into the sales org at Microsoft. So I think just taking the skill sets, you know, you can apply entrepreneurship to a lot of different roles. And because it is comprehensive and you're kind of working on these projects in real time, doing the marketing, financials, and all of these things, I got a lot of value from, you know, our capstone, which was essentially pitching an idea and working on it for that full semester.
Awesome. And I appreciate that because I think what's powerful about your story is you didn't have to choose the track that sounded like the profession that you wanted to go into. You chose the track that was most beneficial for you to understand how your story or your skill set was going to be the strongest. So that's awesome. So Todd, we'll round it out with you, see if there's anything you want to add here.
Yeah, I think I did a couple of concentrations. I wasn't, you know, overly focused on making sure I kind of checked any of those off. What I was focused on was there's a lot of really interesting offerings at Tepper from, you know, something that really surprised me was contracts class with Gary Smith. And I couldn't believe how interesting a class about contracts was. And that guy had a story about everything, right? And why understanding contracts is really important, to a business and government class with Jay Apt, who is a NASA astronaut, right? So he's been to space several times, and he's got a remarkable background from venture capital to managing I think the Carnegie Library system to working at NASA. And so there's just tons of really interesting things that you can do. But I really got a lot out of a lot of the operations management classes in my current job as well.
Awesome. Where I want to go next, and actually, Todd, you teed it up perfectly, is that anytime someone talks about academics, usually there may be that favorite professor or favorite class or favorite learning opportunity. So I knew you already named a few, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything to the list or if you wanted any of your fellow alumni to kind of talk about any of their favorites from the program.
I'll add 2 that I really loved. One was a negotiations class with Professor Chow, and the other was restructuring with formerly Dean Damon, Bob Damon. Those were just terrific classes that I really loved. Very engaging, interactive, hands-on classes.
Awesome. Anybody else want to kick off with a favorite professor or learning opportunity?
I think for me, similar to what Todd mentioned, Professor Child in negotiations class, I think that's always like a fan favorite every semester is given, definitely with Professor Child. So on top of that one, I would say Mobile and IoT was a course that I took, was joint between Tepper and I believe the CS school. And it pretty much just talks about technology dating, you know, back to the beginning of, you know, the telco systems to the, you know, mobile devices, going into like where technology is today. And I think that was probably like maybe my second favorite after like negotiation, just because it kind of pretty much up my alley, but it was pretty cool to kind of take a course, and you actually took a course with students in the CS school, and then you did like a project at the end of the semester that you had a presentation and like kind of like a career fair kind of thing, a presentation fair.
Awesome.
I think for me, the most memorable one was, I don't remember who the professor was, but it was acting for business. And and one of the things that you may or may not know about Carnegie Mellon is it's also a very, very good art school with people who go to Broadway, win Tonys. One of the guys from Hamilton, I think, is from Carnegie Mellon. And so in this class, you're basically doing acting, but you're using it to improve your communication skills, your executive presence. And that helped me. I'm very introverted. It helped me kind of be able to stand in front of an audience and, 200-300 people and be able to deliver a presentation confidently with gravitas and really command presence of a stage. So that's one that was definitely really memorable and unique for me.
Awesome.
And
I'm
sorry, Jared.
No, Victoria, you're up.
No, I think for me, believe it's 2 of your first year. There's a class with Professor Brandy Avon. It's an organizational behavior class. And I think for me, coming from a nonprofit that was 15 people, that class really exposed me to how organizations operate, how to become visible, kind of those soft skills that you look for with a lot of data to back it up. So I think that was a really important class for me. And of course, her lecture style is, fantastic. And then I mentioned Craig before from the entrepreneurship track. And I call him out now because I think there is an ability to lean on your professors too for some of that professional development, exploring career opportunities, picking their brain. They've been in these places, as Todd mentioned earlier. So they're a really great resource in and outside of the classroom.
And again, teeing up the next subject perfectly. So I know everyone is always interested in understanding how your career journey went while you were in the program and how that led to maybe your first job outside of a program. So what I was hoping is that maybe, and I'll give you kind of like a quick example here, is that, what was your journey as you came to the program? Did you already know what you wanted to do as you came in? What was that first year recruitment like for internship? Did you just do on-campus recruiting? Did you go to national conferences? So just kind of walk us through that journey until you essentially had that, very victorious moment of you saying, I accepted that first job and kind of celebrated with, whoever were your mentors or your coaches at that point. Does anybody want to kick us off for that journey first?
I'm happy to, I can talk about the consulting path. I came into Tepper knowing I wanted to do consulting out of business school. And there is like a very specific timeline and process to consulting recruiting, preparing for consulting interviews, doing the networking with the different consulting firms. And so there's a lot of resources at Tepper, specifically the Tepper Consulting Club, to help prepare you for what that recruiting is like. They'll do practice case interviews. I know when my second year, I was on the board of the club and I probably did like 100 practice case interviews with first year MBAs to like help them get ready for that interview style. And there's more than enough people who are willing to help do that preparation and coaching to make sure you're ready and you're confident going into those interviews. And so I ultimately went down that career path, and it was a great learning experience for me. My few years in consulting helped me figure out what I really wanted to do long term. So yeah, that's kind of my like brief story on how I approached it when I came into Tepper.
Awesome. And the one thing I want to highlight about that story is that interviewing is a skill. Your presence can only take you so far. So there is a lot of prep and there is a lot of process to it to make sure that you're polished and ready to go for those different opportunities. Todd, I saw you on mute as well. So I know, I think you obviously you're in consulting now. So I don't know if that was the path you took as well. I want to add any additional color.
Yeah, I mean, Nick hit most of the key points. What I would comment on is that it's very much a pay it forward community at Tepper. And so what Nick said about, when he was a second year, he was interviewing or doing prep work with all of the first years. that is very much the case. And I think I probably speak for everybody that they had some similar experience when they, like, depending on what they were recruiting for, whether it's business and technology or marketing, each of the clubs are very involved with having mentees from the year below and helping them to prepare. And it's a huge help to go through that process with somebody who's been in your shoes just 1 year ago. But I did, just to, I think, really answer your question, a lot of on-campus interviewing, and then I had an internship at Arconic, and I ended up getting into Alex Partners through the Tepper Alumni Network.
Awesome.
Yep.
And JR, for me, the path was a little bit different than I think Nick and Todd, but similar to Shamel. So I was a consortium applicant. So before we enroll, and go to base camp and officially start school, consortium students go to a conference called OP. And there are several companies there, but the process of preparing is very similar to what you would expect once you actually begin Mini One. So I worked very closely with our career counselors, did a lot of interview prep, star stories, and really worked with them to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go into healthcare or tech just because they were, difficult, fast changing industries. And I actually went to Pfizer for my internship in their internal consulting practice. So it hit all the bullet points that I was looking for. And I remember before going into my summer, I actually met with Todd, and this is part of the Pay It Forward culture. And he kind of prepped me on what to expect from a consulting internship and all of that. Post my internship, I knew that I didn't really want to be in healthcare. Just really wasn't the right fit for the industry, but it was really easy to just take the same practices from year one, apply them into year two, and begin the recruiting process again. And that's how I ended up in tech, which was one of the 2 places that I wanted to explore. Leveraging the network, the resources to prepare for interviews, classmates on kind of ramping up on the tech piece that I might have missed my first year.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing it. I think that was a great kind of segue of, like you said, you had a few strong ideas of what you wanted to do, and you went down one path, and just because you decided that it wasn't the right path didn't mean that the journey was over. You obviously found a great placement and opportunity afterwards. Shamel, anything to add to the career journey?
I think, yeah, Victoria covered like the consortium process. For me, actually, even before consortium, I did a program called MLT, Management Leaders for Tomorrow. And it's pretty much similar, but they had like professional development program, and they had their own version of like I guess, career introduction to like interacting with companies early before you actually start business school. So I think that was like my start, but then going to consortium and then on campus, it was kind of like eye-opening seeing, everyone's focused on like one field or just many fields. And then for someone knowing I want to do tech, it's easy to kind of be strayed away from what you really want, because like, I feel like the world is your oyster once you get on campus. It's like, why do I want to do, product management when I could probably do, I don't know, consulting, or I can probably do some other career path that just seems really interesting. So for me, it was a little difficult in the beginning, just to like really focus and hone in on what I really want to do, just because I saw everyone doing cool things. I was like, yeah, I could probably do that too, or I'm interested there. Like, how do I make it all work? But finally, I kind of honed in on product management, and I had a few interviews early on in my first year, and leveraging like second years, I actually interned at some of these companies for like interview prep, so on and so forth. Really did help. Even with like negotiating when it came to my second year, when I had offers for full-time opportunities, like prior second years that are now alumni, were like helping me have some of those discussions on like how to negotiate like some of the offers and weigh my opportunities.
Awesome. So I'm going to use one of the questions that came into the chat and kind of maybe make it a little bit more holistic to the group here. But we obviously just talked about the academic journey that you took to essentially gain maybe those new skill sets or shore up some other skill sets that you had. You just talked about your process of going through and finding that right fit for you as you were leaving the MBA program. So maybe we kind of combine those now, and as you're thinking about, now that you've been in your careers for a few years post MBA, how do you feel like Tepper prepared you to be successful in either your current roles or those first roles? I'm not sure if everyone is still in their first company or not. I don't know if we, well, I guess Nick, I know you're not. I think you've already made that jump. And I'm just wondering, you know, what are those things that you consistently pull on to make sure that you're able to be successful in your current roles?
I can give an example that was given from my manager last year. So it actually came from somebody else that they noticed it. I don't consider myself, you know, relative to my peers at Tepper, strong quantitatively. I came from the humanities background and I went to Tepper because I wanted to kind of round out my experience and get into the analytics. But I think over the 2 years of just being immersed in these courses and the way that we talk and the way that we look at business problems, it just becomes a part of the way that you approach your work. So I remember my first year, I manage, you know, a list of customers, and there's a lot of data involved into, you know, how are we strategically going to think about which ones we prioritize and, you know, move consumption essentially for our business. And my manager just called out that, you know, unique to other team members on my team who have even been doing this role for several years, my approach was very data driven, and it provided unique perspectives into how I was approaching my day-to-day work. So I think that has been a highlight that, you know, for me made going to Tepper all the more worth it. Even though some parts of it were challenging, it was a good type of challenge because being in tech, that's kind of what they're looking for. So.
Awesome. No, it's a great example. It's like I wrote a little script for you. I did not.
Yeah, I think I can tack onto that. I'm actually laughing a little bit because of what Victoria said. I was sort of the opposite, right? So actually, when I talk to people about business school, I tell them I think everybody kind of goes into business school with their own goals, and it's sort of like a choose your own adventure, which is nice because everybody comes from different backgrounds, has different things that they want to work on. And I had a very quantitative background, right? So I had a lot of the business experience and academics from my undergrad, but what I really wanted to develop was my leadership and communication skills. I wasn't comfortable giving presentations. You know, I felt like there was a lot of improvement I could do in terms of how I communicate, how I manage projects. And so I, you know, took some leadership roles on campus. I was in the student government, worked very closely with Victoria in her role as well. And so that enabled me really to develop a lot more confidence in terms of how I manage projects, how I manage smaller teams. I got the opportunity to speak in front of people quite often. And, you know, in my job now, that's something I have to do every single day. And so I think I get generally like pretty good reviews on my communication styles and the way that I manage projects and communicate and lay out strategies and plans. So for me, those, you know, I'm air quoting here, but kind of softer skills, right, have been really important to me in my current role.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Nick or Shamel, anything to add on that topic?
I think the main thing I would add is, so my approach to business school was paying a lot of money to go to school for 2 years. Like get the most out of it. Take, you know, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, things that you know, may be an opportunity area for you or things you're uncomfortable with. And I think those are the areas where you find you grow the most, you learn the most. And that was kind of my approach at Tepper is these 2 years, I'm gonna stretch my capabilities. I'm gonna learn new things about myself that, you know, I didn't know before. I'm gonna learn new skills. And I think at the end of the day, what that like translates to in the real world, once you start working again, is it's how you approach problems and problem solving. And those core skills is, I think, one of the things is one of the key things you get out of Tepper. Because I've worked on, you know, in consulting, you may be working on projects in different industries, you're faced with different problems. That's like the one constant, you know, any job you do is you're constantly facing difficult, challenging, ambiguous problems. And Tepper really sets you up to be able to, on how you think about approaching those problems and how you tackle those problems. And I think that's, you know, no matter what you do, as long as you're getting the most out of your 2 years and really trying to stretch yourself, you'll come out of the program be able to face whatever problems are thrown at you in your career.
I'll keep it brief on my side. Similar to Todd, like I came in with a quant background already, and I was trying to figure out how can I round out like my skill set to be, a better public speaker and just think more like big picture and strategy related. But I would say like today in like my current job, like probably the two courses that I kind of tap back into the most are like negotiation and power influence, because as a product manager, like I manage a product, but I don't manage any people that I need to actually do the work that I need to get done. So it's really difficult to pretty much influence individuals to do what you need to get done if you don't like have any authority over them. So I think those are probably like the two courses that I try to like think about, like what can I do and change my approach on a day-to-day basis to kind of get my job done by, giving people more work or getting things done for me, essentially.
No, and I think that I hear that concept a lot, influence without authority. And again, that kind of segues really nicely into the next subject I want to talk about. And I know some of you already talked about that, maybe what you felt like you also developed in the program, but we didn't maybe get to talk specifically about overall leadership or maybe even the Accelerate Leadership Center. So some of those other experiences that you really get to test some of those leadership skills, practice those, or maybe even talk maybe a little bit more about that individualized leadership journey that you can have with any of the coaches. So if anybody wants to kick it off with any in particular leadership opportunity or development that they had during Tepper that they felt like was very impactful, would love to kind of go down that road next.
I can talk about tapping into. So I got a lot out of some of the student government roles, and so I don't want to belabor that point. But one thing that I really tapped into that I found to be extremely helpful was the Accelerate leadership coaches. And so those are your peers who are trained in communication skills, and they volunteer their time to you as their classmates on anything, whether it's a resume review to helping you think through, how do I want to answer this behavioral interview question, right? So there are so many times when you're prepping and you're prepping and you're prepping and you get mind block. I can't really put a good, exclamation point on this story about leadership. And then you go in there and you talk with them for 30 minutes or an hour, and you walk out and you say, man, they just helped me figure out the right way to communicate this story in 20 minutes. And I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks, right? And so that to me was something I used as much as possible, because it's always great to kind of work through some of these problems with your peers and get different perspectives. And it's all volunteers, it's great.
Well, and one thing I'll add to that, because sharing a little bit of program details, that was such impactful, and the feedback from students over the years has said it was so impactful, they've actually made that more into now a paid position to make sure that we consistently have enough leadership and communication coaches to work with all the students throughout their program. So we're excited for that.
And JR, I'll add a little bit to something that Todd mentioned. The student boards, I think, are a really good opportunity to practice leadership, as you're living it, because I think for the first time for a lot of students, it's the first time that you're trying to build consensus and practice your leadership skills with people that may have more experience in the workforce than you, who may be older. It's, demographically very diverse, the people that you're serving on boards with. I also leverage, much as Todd did, the Accelerate Leadership Center, but the coaches that we have specifically. So talking about my leadership style, maybe where I could improve. They helped with everything from conflict resolution to, I did a couple of panels through the school where we focused on my communication. I learned that I ask questions in threes when I interview people. So it's very little things that they can pick up on from working with you that I thought were really helpful, that I've taken from Tepper to working now, that I just keep in mind. And another thing that I'll mention too is when you meet with them ahead of your internship, they put together a professional development plan with you. What are your goals? What do you want to practice over the next 3 months? And you can kind of, work with them throughout the summer to keep that updated and make sure that you're, making progress.
Awesome. That was great. Anything else on this topic? All right, so one of the last kind of like bigger areas that I wanted to talk about, because I think that obviously we went through a lot of more of that professional, the work, things that may be more about your own professional development. But obviously when you join an MBA program, it's about your student experience, it's about the community, it's about that overall kind of, I would say, the experience of being with a lot of other people. So maybe we can talk a little bit about how you have felt as part of the Tepper community. Maybe we'll start there. And if you put yourself in, whether you were a student, maybe from that perspective, or how you stay connected to the Tepper community as an alum.
Go ahead, Jamel.
Yeah, I can kick that off. So, coming from like big cities, all my life before Tepper, like coming from New York, I also lived in DC. Like I didn't really know much about Pittsburgh, and I was like, all right, Pittsburgh, I know the Steelers, and I know just diehard fan base for sports wise. I was like, all right, I'm not sure what I'm getting myself into. But as you get to Tepper, and being I did consortium, I met a lot of classmates prior to getting on campus. But then I remember getting to campus, or before getting on campus, like just trying to figure out, all right, where I'm going to live and like who I'm going to live with. And it's somewhat random, like my roommate situation, but it ended up just being like really great. The two people that I did live with, that we lived together for the 3 years. And I would say like the Tepper community is pretty easy to kind of get acclimated like in and like figure out like commonalities and like how you all work together, collaborate on classwork. But I just want to add, even outside of just the Tepper community itself, just think about the greater Pittsburgh community. Pittsburgh has way more to offer than you probably would think, just coming into the city. You think of other MBA programs that might be in other locations that may not have as much going on. I would say Pittsburgh has a lot to offer, from like just social as well as like sports, and just actually a whole bunch of towns that just make up the city and give it like an authentic feeling. And then for me, I was actually able to, through like the Black Business Association, collaborate with students over at like the Katz Business School over at University of Pittsburgh, and built a lot of friendships and partnerships there and do some joint events. So I'd say there's definitely a lot of opportunities to engage like within the Tepper community, as well as the greater like Pittsburgh community that's out there.
Nice. And that's nice to hear, because I just moved back to Pittsburgh. I grew up here, but I've been gone for 17 years. So I'm exploring it again as a young professional. So Nick, I know you also unmuted there. So you want to add something?
So I could tell a little bit like about my experience with like the Tepper Alumni Network. So I've had, this is my third job post business school now. And every single job I've had post MBA, there's been a Tepper alum that's been willing to build a relationship with me, be like a cheerleader on the sideline for me, and like helping me through the recruiting process at the new company. So when I was in consulting, there's an alumni network there from Tepper that helped me through that whole process. There was at Wayfair, there were Tepper alumni that helped with introductions there, and helping me meet people in advance of the interview process. The current startup I'm in was started. CEO is a Tepper alum, and some of our leadership team are also Tepper alumni. So just like throughout my career post MBA, Tepper has been like the one thread that continue to leverage. And it's honestly like one of the things I look for now too, because I like my classmates at business school, and throughout my career, they're people I just enjoy working with. And I know that's always like, I'm going to find good people if I find people from Tepper.
Awesome. And that's great to hear. I see a lot of shaking heads. So obviously that's a lot of agreement there.
Yeah, and one thing I think to note is that while you're at school, it's a smaller community, right? It's very close knit. You get to know everybody. You're not split up into cohorts. You have class with everybody. You see everybody in the halls. You talk to everybody and get to know them. And that's really nice, right? So at the end of 2 years, you're like, however many people this is in my class, I have this many, new friends or colleagues or acquaintances. And I think that tends to make the bond a little stronger, even in the years beyond graduation, which is nice.
And quickly on that last point that Ton mentioned, I've benefited, obviously, I could speak about this a lot. I loved our class. Jamal and I were in the same class. I thought we had a great time. We were in school. I still see a lot of my classmates in the city of New York because there are a handful of us here. But professionally, I think building relationships with people that you respect and that you trust as you're navigating your career post MBA is really helpful about working and thinking through career moves and decisions and compensation and like these little things that we might take for granted are really important, I think, in how we navigate our careers that can have big impacts. So just knowing that I have that group of people that I can ask very honest questions has been really instrumental for me, and really good advice from them too, because they're all very successful in their respective areas.
No, and I think that's a great point. I think when you have a community that's supportive and that you can trust with some of those questions that are important to you and be able to ask whatever's on your mind to be able to maximize all those different opportunities, it adds up over the career, and it definitely can help you find your path to where you want to go. I'm looking through the chat again, so I want to ask this question from someone from the audience. And I actually hear this a lot in all of my interaction with prospective students, is that a lot of times people want to know about what was that classroom environment like? And in particular, it's more of, so was there a lot of group coursework? Was there a lot of case studies? Like if you had to maybe summarize the type of classroom environment or learning opportunities that you had, maybe you can talk about the type of classroom environment.
I can say it's all pretty interactive. Some of it's case-based, some of it's not, right? Which is a nice mix. I think, the different schools all have their own, I guess, strategy in terms of what or how they're preparing you through classes. And so we have a mix. Some of my favorite classes were case-based. I remember the Rent the Runway case most fondly, but others you're working in small group teams for one of the either semesters or years, I'm not sure. You have a core group that you work on multiple different classes with, and so you really kind of like build a strong bond with those classmates, but you also try to figure out over the time, like, I'm going to have to work successfully with this diverse group of people for a prolonged period of time. And so that also helps you prepare for the real world where you're navigating different personalities and different strengths and weaknesses and trying to come to like a really successful team dynamic.
Awesome. Anybody want to add anything there, or we can move on to, I think, one last fun question for the group. Okay, so everybody that's attending tonight is considering business school, and now some people could be in different parts of that journey. Some people may have already applied. Some people are just considering an MBA. But I think that what is always valuable when you get to talk to those that have already gone through it and those have had success after the program would be that advice piece. So if you kind of, rewind back, I won't say the number of years. I know you're all relatively recent graduates, but when you think back to maybe to being in their shoes as you were about to embark on this journey, what advice would you give someone to make sure that they're able to find that right fit or be successful within the process to be able to get into maybe the business school of their choice? Hopefully Tepper.
I think maybe the advice that I would give is really do your homework up front, like figure out what you're looking to get out of a business school. Like a lot of programs kind of sometimes advertise the same themes, but I think you really get a sense of it when you go on campus or you talk to current students of like, what can I really get out of this program and what can I bring to the program as well. So I'd say like definitely do your homework up front, because like what you read online, may sound the same thing that you may read about another university. So this makes it a little more difficult to decipher and figure out the delta there. So I think like definitely doing the homework up front kind of clarifies the picture, and you can apply to both, and then you know based off your visits, like, all right, this is what I think prior to getting in, and this is how I may weigh my options on where to go from there.
I'm going to piggyback on that, what you said about doing the visits. To me, I was surprised. There was a handful of schools I visited, and some of them I left with very different feelings than others, right? And for Tepper, I visited and I walked away and I said, I loved that, right? And I don't know if it was, or I know what it was. It was a mixture of the people, but also, the feeling I got on campus and being in Pittsburgh. And I walked away and I said, I would really love to get into Tepper. And there were other schools where I was more ambivalent, right? And I just said, okay, it's a great school, but maybe it's not the best for me. And that really comes from, if you can, I think, seeing the campus, talking to the people. I found when I visited Tepper that I probably met a dozen people and each of them were volunteering their time in some way. And that spoke a lot to me, right? I felt like I got an understanding of how collaborative and supportive it was going to be. So that's, my advice is do your homework, talk to people, see as many places as you can, if you can, and you'll get a good feel for it.
Awesome. Great advice.
Mine is similar. I think when you're applying to business school, it's what are your goals post business school? And I think even more importantly, what kind of community do you want to be in, right? 2 years is a large financial, but also a large time investment, especially for the period in our lives that we're in. So I think Tepper offering that community, the support, you're going to do a lot of things that you're going to be really bad at. And it's nice to have peers that you feel and faculty that you feel are supporting you along the way to pick you back up and that you want to help in return. So I think that's really important when you're considering schools. And then in terms of applying to Tepper specifically, I got this advice from an alum and I think it was, couldn't have been more spot on. It's a small community. Everyone's bringing something to the table. So just think very critically about what you would bring to Tepper. And I think, tell that story.
Awesome advice.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is similar to like, it's a small community. If like you're interested in Tepper and not only your application at Tepper, but like other schools, like understand why you want to go to business school. Make sure you like really have internalized and like figured out why you want to do this. Be authentic in your applications and how you talk to the schools about why you want to do it. And the process will go well. And if it doesn't work out the first time, don't get discouraged, understand, why it didn't work out and try again. My first time applying to Tepper, I didn't get in, and I kept in touch with the admissions office. I try to learn more and internalize why I wanted to go to business school more, and reapplied the second year and got in. So if it doesn't work out the first year, again, make sure you're being authentic in why you want to go to business school, and make sure it's the right fit for you.
Awesome. And great advice there. I'm gonna kind of summarize two things that I heard that I think would be really good to reemphasize again. And I'll say this is that being your authentic self, like really thinking through that, reflecting on things and trying to share who you are and seeing if there's a fit rather than reading through the website and just trying to get in. While that may lead to success, it may not lead to happiness, and it may not lead to the real value that you're trying to get from the degree. So I think that's great. And I think that's also what makes it easier for us, is that if you are being your authentic self, we can help you figure out if this is the right fit. The second piece, and I just think, Shema, you actually maybe started with this, is that there are a lot of consistent terms within business schools, within business. A lot of people are going to say a lot of the same things, but a lot of times the execution of those things is really what makes the difference. Everybody can say leadership, everybody can say analytics, everyone can say community, But you need to figure out what you want in those different areas and make sure you find the school that has that right combination or the right emphasis on certain areas for you. I want to go here next and say I really want to thank all of our alumni for spending their time volunteering tonight to really just share their stories, share their insight. We greatly appreciate it. It was a fun night for me as I'm newer to the school, learning some of the different stories and alumni. When we're able to travel again, I hope to see you all in your respective cities, buy dinner, buy drinks, say hello, and really reconnect again. So I'm gonna end this evening with, I guess, two things. So one, if you are looking for how to navigate or how to get to know Tepper, as well as if you're looking forward to how to put together a strong application, we have a program called Chart Your Path. It gives you an opportunity to go through, and it kind of walks you through what an ideal, I guess, admissions process would be in the way of get to know the school, look at the program, interact with students, interact with staff, interact with alumni. So you don't have to already have that mentor that walks you through the process. We've done that hard work for you and can kind of walk you through it. And lastly, we have a lot of great events coming up. So if you're able to attend any of those, we would love to see you. In particular, I'll call this event out. We have our diversity weekend coming up in less than 2 weeks. It's on our website. You can probably find it anywhere. If you feel like that would be an event that would fit you, we would love to have you. It's virtual, so you don't have to try to travel to Carnegie Mellon. But you also find out very quickly that we do things really great in a virtual environment. We have software that will bring you into the Tepper Quad like you wouldn't believe. So everybody have a wonderful rest of your evening, and thanks.
Thanks.